Welcome back to Thinking Homiletically. Exegesis, that is the critical analysis of the BC texts, asks, what does the text say? What does the text mean? And then, what's the significance of the text for me and my audience? And it's at this point that I have to shift the focus of my exegetical work to the other peer, the AD audience. We'll come back to that. Back to the first peer, the BC text. Once I've analyzed both peers and understand them, then it's time to design the actual bridge with its roadbed or pathway. I do that by exploring what are the most effective ways that I can communicate the message of this text to my particular audience. So, back to the peer on the other side, the BC text. What does it say? What does the text say? Do I understand the locutionary act? It's quite possible to miss this even when there's not such a gap historically or culturally or linguistically, as my friend Herman illustrates. Well, I need to pay attention to the author's location, the author's consciousness, the author's chosen genre, his function. What's the author's core message? Well, we're going to look at Proverbs chapter 2. What's the sage's location? Well, in the first place, it's antiquity, not modernity or postmodernity. It's the Orient, not the Occident. It's a communitarian society, which includes notions of corporate solidarity as opposed to the rugged individualism that characterizes much of the West, most particularly the U.S. That location is a pastoral agrarian economy, not a slightly industrial but predominantly service and information economy. And nominally at least, it's a theocratic monarchy. What do we make of the author's consciousness? 1 Kings reports that Solomon demurs on being made king in place of his deceased father, and out of a deep sense of inadequacy, that we've seen rather commonly expressed, haven't we, when God calls persons to step out in a new venture for him. Well, what's the main thing that Solomon prays for? He asks, give your servant therefore an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this great people? And in 1 Kings 4, it's reported that God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure, a breadth of mind like the sand of the seashore. So Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt. And then we come to good old King Hiram, that Phoenician king that Solomon did business with. It's true that his response to listening to Solomon isn't direct evidence of Solomon's self-consciousness. I think it's telling that Hiram responds, blessed be the Lord this day who has given to David a wise son to be over this great people. Well, his chosen genre? The genre of the first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs is discourse. Yeah, wisdom discourse, sure. More specifically, maybe exhortation. The authors of wisdom function as sages, as teachers of wisdom. Remember back when we were thinking through the nature and the claims of the book of Proverbs, we saw that the first 9 chapters record a series of discourses on various facets of godly wisdom. And check out chapter 1, verse 8, and then scan what follows. Check chapter 2, verse 1. 3, verse 1. 4 verse 1. Well, what do you make of the genre? Does it make sense that the discourse is couched as a wise parent's instructions to their child? I mean, I see shades of Deuteronomy 6 and its instructions to disciple the next generation. So, as we look at Proverbs chapter 2, our task is to interpret the discourse with a view to understanding the core message, or, as Haddon Robinson puts it, the big idea. As with any document, if the author or the editor provides an introduction or a prologue in which he or she states the purpose of the document, I think it's worthwhile pausing and taking that in. You know what? We have just such an introduction or prologue in Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. So, what's the stated purpose of this collection, this instruction, this training? It's so a person will know experientially, and lakach, grasp and understand. The stated scope of this knowing and understanding includes chokmah, a practical appreciation for the nature and character and presence of God. Musar, moral training, discipline. Binah, a practical understanding of what God expects of those who bear His image and for which we image bearers are obligated. Lakachat musar haskel, to grasp, to appropriate wise instruction that involves tzedek, righteousness, what reflects God's character and practices God's will. Mishpat, righteous choice with respect to one's options or with respect to others' actions. Mesharim, integrity, rectitude of thought and behavior. Well, the intended outcome includes personal moral and spiritual development. Look at developing a prudent cleverness for the naive, the simpleton, some translations puts it, and knowledge and mazimah, discretion for the inexperienced, the na'ar. Same descriptive word Jeremiah used when he said to God's call. Remember, I can't do that. I'm just the na'ar. I'm just the youngster. But listen, this project is not just for the naive and the inexperienced. Verse 5, it's for the wise person as well. Well, now to the text per se. Proverbs chapter 2, verses 1 through 22, we want to do a clause map, a syntactical layout of the unit. And early on, we see that in the first 4 verses, we've got the protasis, if, and then verses 5 through 11, the apodosis, then. Verses 12 through 19 develop the purpose, and then verses 20 to 22, the outcome. So, in this discourse, the proverbial parent, you noticed in 1:8 that both mother and father are an active part of this disciple-making project. But that's what begins this episode of intergenerational disciple-making. What was commissioned back in Deuteronomy 6. We'll come back to that and dig in a little deeper next time. See you in a bit.